What occurred to me a couple years ago may seem nothing out of the ordinary to some folk, but what I felt that day, I've only experienced once before, and it made me feel something I can only describe as primal, for lack of a better word. My ex significant other and I booked this amazing homestead for a vacation for 2 days and nights after reading a lot of very positive reviews online. It was managed by a very charming and hospitable elderly couple. Now, this homestead is smack dab in the middle of a huge sprawling estate surrounded by coffee plantations on three sides, has its own private waterfall, and behind this estate are very large hills, most of which is owned by the couple. The accommodation provided to us was a quaint little cottage nestled between the main homestead, where the couple lived, and another larger cottage that was occupied by a couple of tourist families. The three buildings are surrounded by a very beautifully tended garden. A narrow path winds in front of the three buildings and heads towards the hills. Our first day was generally uneventful, as both of us were exhausted from the long drive from the city we lived in, and we just soaked in the hospitality and the amazing view all around us. The next day, we were given the option of heading to the waterfall or hiking up the hills, and my ex, after a lot of debate, chose the hills. So a little after 10 a.m, we packed ourselves a nice little brunch and headed out towards the path that led to the hills. The weather was cool and a light bit of rain had kicked up the smell of damp soil that was invigorating to the soul of city folk. As we reached the end of this winding path, we were faced with hiking up a pretty steep climb directly up the hill, or walk towards a now unpaved path that skirted around the hill. Since the rain had left the soil all around us pretty damp and the grass wet and slippery, we figured we could find a more gradual climbing spot if we skirted around the hill. So off we went down the unpaved path, and about 10 minutes into the walk, the terrain changed dramatically. Instead of open land, we were now walking basically into a ravine, and the trees on both sides of the ravine basically blotted out the sunlight to a great extent. It was as if we were in the middle of the jungle all of a sudden, but unfazed, we still trekked on, hoping to find another way to climb the hill, which was not visible anymore due to the terrain. After about an hour's worth of navigating through the ravine, we found that the path veered off into even more dense jungle terrain on the left, and on the right was a dilapidated old wooden hutch that seemed long vacated. So as we took a breather to try to figure out what to do next, we were met with the angry barking of what I assumed were not less than 7 or 8 dogs, and the sounds were only getting closer, so we beat a hasty retreat back the way we came from. Once the barking subsided, we regained our composure, only to find tons of leeches trying to get onto us from the wet bushes and blades of grass. This freaked out the ex, and I had to run through the boulder-filled ravine to basically catch up to her. We ended up back at the steep spot of the hill, and by this time, I'd had enough, but had to give in to her persuasion and ended up climbing the steep part of the hill on all fours, getting dirt and grass all over. To my relief, the steep bit gave way to what I can only describe as a meadow of lush green grass, bordered on the left by bushes, with sweet-smelling wildflowers, and on the right, an unobstructed view of gentle rolling meadows that actually had cattle grazing, but I didn't find anyone herding the cattle. So an hour and a half later of hiking through the meadow, we chanced upon a muddy path carved into a much gentler sloping hill. Now this hill was huge, but the path made the climb much more forgiving. Upon cresting the hill, the other side of the crest is a sheer drop off, but the view of the alleys below was nothing short of spellbinding. We rested and tucked into the food we had bought, all the while just admiring the view, and it was 2 p.m. by now. The crest of the hill was so high up that every time a cloud passed through, we absolutely drizzled on, and after a few minutes we were greeted by the sun. This was heaven to a couple of city slickers. By 5 p.m, I was getting antsy to start to negotiate our way back down, as I didn't want to slip on the still wet grass, and I sure as heck didn't want to try my luck with climbing down in the darkness. After about a half hour of begging and pleading with a reluctant ex, I finally managed to drag her back off the crest and start our climb down. The first thing I noticed was the absolute silence. No birds chirping, not even insect sounds. We were losing light faster than we could climb down, and the silence was really getting to me. I looked around to see if I could see the cattle that were grazing, but no, everything was deserted. And it was at this point that I felt like I was being watched from behind. The ex was behind me while we climbed down, so I asked her to go on ahead of me and I would bring up the rear. In my mind, I wanted to put myself between her and any person that would meet us from behind. But a few minutes later, I got the same feeling of being watched, not only from behind, but from all around us except the front. All the hair on my forearms were upright. I was hyper-vigilant, almost bordering on panic. The ex didn't feel anything, but was creeped out by my behaviour. Up to that moment, I'd been cheerful, joking away and muttering everything I could think of, but now I was unnaturally quiet as per her observation and extremely focused on getting off the hill and at the same time looking all around searching for someone. Before the silence and the sense of being watched hit me, all my mind was preoccupied with was not to slip and to look out for snakes. But now, that was not a concern. I edged her down faster but didn't tell her anything so as not to panic her, and partly not to seem like a blithering idiot in my mind. I was ready to slip and slide down the hill if it meant a faster way down, but didn't want to leave her behind. After about half an hour of this torment, a new feeling crept over me. I felt anger from whatever or whoever was watching us. Like we were not meant to be there. Like we were trespassers. It was the complete opposite of the absolute bliss of climbing up the hill. And still, no sound. Not a damn cricket to be heard. No wind, not even a breeze. Then, as if by some miracle, a dog appeared behind me. I'd not seen this fellow when we climbed up. He was a thin, emaciated brown mongrel who had his tail tucked between his legs and looked us warily, all the while following us at a distance. Although the sight of the dog put me in a bit of ease, the feeling of being watched lingered on. Since I also didn't want to be bitten by the dog, I made the ex stop and give way to see if the dog would pass us by, and he did. He crept closer to us and wagged his tail while looking at both of us, and passed us by, still a bit wary of us. And then, the most curious thing happened. He would climb down a bit and wait until we reached him, and repeat this over and over until we reached the bottom of the hill. It was like he was escorting us to safety. I felt a slight bit of ease at last. Now focused on the dog and desperately trying to ignore the still lingering, menacing feeling that was now behind me, I finally realised that we were now climbing down in the dark. And by the time we managed to get back on the paved path, it was 8 p.m. and pitch black. We were walking behind the dog, who was now wagging his tail away and walking closer to us, and much to my relief, I could at last see lights in the distance. The dog escorted us all the way to our cottage, and while I was trying to find some food for him, he disappeared. Only when we got off the hill did that feeling of being watched go away. It was as if someone flipped on a switch and the sounds of insects was instantly all around us. I swore to myself to never again put myself in such a situation if I could help it. When we met our hosts for dinner, they said they were actually worried as we were expected back by 4 p.m. and were trying to reach us on our phones, which had no network coverage throughout the whole ordeal. I didn't want to ask them about this horrendous experience that I had, but inquired about the brown dog and if he was theirs. They told me he's a stray, and was known for escorting past visitors up to the cottage and then disappear. He was nothing short of a miracle, a divine presence who guided us to safety. I know that some of you may think this was lame, or that maybe I just had anxiety. I've been anxious before as I work in a high-stress environment, but this was nothing of the sort. The feeling of being unwelcome, anger and imminent danger is something that still triggers goosebumps when I reminisce. And to that dog, I am eternally grateful. The only other time I felt like this was when I was with friends on a jungle safari, and our group was trailed or stalked by a predator. Well, here we go. This is a story about when I started believing in the paranormal. When I was younger, I lived in a town called Compont, Pennsylvania. It was one of those half houses where we owned one side and another person owned the other. I always got strange vibes. The stairs to the basement and the upstairs felt like it was on fire. I would become red every time I went up or down them. My breathing would become heavy, and at one point it got so bad I passed out. My parents thought I had asthma, but the doctors said I was healthy as a horse. But this resolves around my 1 to 7 years old bedroom, and I remember this story in full detail. One night I was in my bedroom. I had SpongeBob on and fell asleep. I woke up in the morning, sitting on my rocking chair. It was an older fella. Wet strands of hair barely even staying in, a stained tank top, dark cold brown eyes, chain wrapped around his legs and boxers, all while he was soaking wet. He disappeared, but then I heard a dark noise from my closet and a light emanating from it. I opened it. It was my Furby. So I took the batteries out, but it wouldn't stop. It kept talking. Then I looked behind me. There he was, the man, grinning with his crooked teeth. He charged at me. I dropped to the ground and got hit with a sudden cold feeling. I opened my eyes and I was soaked. I screamed. Boom! My door slammed open as my parents rushed in. I exclaimed, "The devil! The devil!" My mom cuddled me in her arms and my dad was asking what happened and why I was wet. Once I calmed down, I explained everything that happened. I changed into dry clothes and was put back to bed. I was explained by my recently divorced dad that he's seen the guy before. Nothing else, that's all he said. Now, me and my mom are living together. The demon was taunting me, and fast forward to 2021, me and my dad had a big fight after we got water dumped all over him, and then ran at me and beat the shit out of me, which we went to court for. I'm safe now, but I'm still shocked by this event. A few years back, I went to my friend Shane's house to pick up some ganj. Shane lived in a recently built house and shared it with two other roommates, a male and female. Both of his roommates were gone while I was there, so it was just me and Shane in the house for my entire visit. After we chit-chatted for a bit and I tell him how much bud I want, we both fell silent as he began to weigh it out. The house is completely quiet, no TV or radio on, as we both stare focused at his scale. When, out of nowhere, I hear in a sing-song tone, a little girl's voice very clearly say, "Shane, Shane." I look up at my friend without saying a word. I was honestly confused at first. My mind was racing. I thought we were in his house alone. Could it be his female roommate, I wonder? No, we were definitely alone. I knew that. On top of this, I knew none of the people living in that house had kids. My rational brain couldn't find a reasonable explanation for what I just heard, so I just stared at Shane to gauge his response. Shane didn't move. He just kept his head down and continued to go on about his business, as if he hadn't heard anything. This confused me even more, and not wanting to be rude, I waited another beat to see if he would respond to whoever was calling his name. When he still didn't do anything, I said, "Hey, someone is calling you." That's when Shane looked up at me, slowly, and said, "So, you heard that too?" My eyes must have been the size of dinner plates at that moment. I could feel my heart racing. Heard that too? What do you mean? I asked Shane what he heard, and he said he heard a little girl call his name twice. I said I heard the same thing. Shane went on to explain that he hears a little girl calling his name all the time in the house. No one else ever seemed to hear it, so he just thought he was going crazy. Until that night when I heard it, clear as day. After he told me that, we both fell silent again as he finished up. I paid him what I owed him and got out of there quick. To this day, this remains to be one of the most paranormal experiences I've ever had. I can't help but feel like it was real too, especially because both Shane and I heard it. I want to start by saying that, though I have a history of mental health struggles, that I'm not, nor have I ever been schizophrenic. I've never hallucinated, auditory or otherwise. In fact, All of the experiences I have had, starting over 2 years ago, began after I left a Christian cult and my mental health began to improve. Back when the experiences began, I lived in Mississippi, and as my kid had claimed since moving there, our house was absolutely haunted. Things moved, disembodied voices, often mimicking my voice or my then husband's, shadow people, visible orbs, and a lot of ghost cats. I thought leaving that house would be the end of my experiences. Wrong. While I've had many experiences over recent years, one stands out to me over the others, and it was witnessed by 3 other people. Right before the pandemic, my small family moved to Washington State to be with family who weren't involved in the cult. It felt like coming home, like I should have been with them all along, and generally all around the most positive choice I've ever made. To get on our feet, we lived with my aunt and uncle for several months, until we could find work and a home of our own. My aunt and uncle actually run a pagan community and have a lot of Celtic imagery of deity figures from Ireland. To say their house had a lot of spirit activity is an understatement. I hadn't been in their door half an hour before things began to happen. Something poked my butt when no one was standing behind me, touched the shaved side of my head, and on more than one occasion called me by my name. All events with witnesses who also began to experience the same things. The most noteworthy experience I had there was the one that will stand out in my memory with crystal clarity forever. Myself, my aunt, my uncle, and my husband were all in their living room, a small room set to the side in their double wide where we had gathered for the evening to watch some TV. The only one not present was my kid, Victory, aged 11 at the time, who was in the library, which doubles as their room on the other side of the house. I was sitting on an easy chair when I look up to see my kid walking by the entry to the room to head into the kitchen. They locked eyes on me. I instantly knew something wasn't right. For context, my child is on the autism spectrum. They don't like to make eye contact, and if they have to, they de-escalate the sensations by being a total goof. They didn't wave, they didn't smile, they didn't do anything but meet my gaze stoically and continue on to the kitchen. I can't overstate the not rightness I felt. I at first thought something was wrong, that they were upset. Understandably, they were going through a lot with the move and being shunned by our cult family members. So I got up to go do the mom thing, calling after them and hurrying up to catch them. I could have only been a step or two ahead of me. I left the room, rounded the corner to face the kitchen, more words on my lips, and no one was there. I was confused. I saw them go to the kitchen, so I called out for my kid, and their voice called back. From the other side of the house, still in their room, having never left. I went back to the living room and asked the others if they had seen Victor walk by, a little unnerved. My uncle said yes, as did my aunt. Tim said they had thought they saw him walk by but paid little mind. So, unless this was some weird shared hallucination, we all saw it. I've since found I am sensitive to the energy spirits give off, and apparently as it runs in the family, unknown to me till now, spiritual gifts are inherited. They call me a baby medium, so I feel confident in saying that I know whatever spirit took the form of my kid did not do so maliciously. They wanted to be noticed, absolutely worked. In fact, most antics from spirits seem to be this, and I have come to accept that they are around me and my family, even after moving into our new apartment. I grew up in an 8-bedroom farmhouse with my dad until I grew up and moved out. We always had extra rooms not being used, and because of the age of the house plus all this extra space, there was always an eeriness, like someone looming in the shadows. If I had to get a drink in the middle of the night, I looked at the ground the whole time because I was scared of what may be looking back at me from the dark corners, rooms and hallways. Even the windows and mirrors were avoided because I wasn't sure what I'd see looking back at me. When I was around 12 years old, I questioned why the room that used to be my nursery was locked from the outside. I didn't think it was weird before then. My dad needed a room for storage, and I figured he just wanted to keep me out. I brought it up to him one day, asking what's so important in there that he needs to keep me out, even though I'm not a child anymore. Typical 12-year-old mentality. Turns out I was not entirely correct about the log. My dad, with a very serious demeanour, sat me down and answered my inquiry. When I was a baby, I slept in this nursery room on the second floor, next to my dad's room. This room was painted by my sister especially for me, with Winnie the Pooh characters and fluffy clouds, the type of thing I think back on and appreciate. The effort and creativity was so admirable. I have a photo of me smiling at Pooh Bear on the wall while we were setting it up. But I'm not the most tech savvy to figure out how to link this photo. Anyway, I was in this nursery in my crib, again right next to my dad's room, the perfect age to be on my own. Every night though, my dad was woken up by me crying. He'd raised 4 children before me, so he was not making first-time parent mistakes that would otherwise be in question. He thought it was probably the switch to being in my own room rather than being in his room that caused my nightly discomfort. He considered bringing my crib back into his room, but of course the nursery was all ready to go. I just graduated. For a while, when I cried in terror, he would come in and check on me, only to find that nothing was wrong, in the sense of present stresses like temperature, diaper change, hungry or thirsty, etc. He would stay with me until I fell asleep or keep the light on to make me feel safer, and then return to his room to get some actual rest. One night, after finally having enough of my distress, he decided to camp out on the floor of my nursery to see if he could figure out what was the matter, but mostly to try and sleep through the night. This was the last time anyone slept in there. I was able to doze off now that I wasn't alone. He, on the other hand, was tossing and turning on the hardwood floor, not comfortable enough to sleep. As he lay there on the floor, mulling over the situation, boom, 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 he was jolted to his feet by a few massive blows to the floorboards beneath him, centered directly on his back, as if someone on the first floor had a battering ram aimed at the ceiling. His first instinct was to rush downstairs and check for intruders. He is a man of logic, brave and ready to defend his family. However, when he got down there, the lights were off, there was no one downstairs, front doors locked, windows locked, no sign of forced entry. No one else lived with us. Our closest neighbour was down the road a quarter mile. And why would they break in just to bang on the ceiling, let alone have it mapped out where my dad would be sleeping in my nursery? And the force of the blows? This wasn't normal. After this event, my dad brought my crib back into his bedroom, and I was able to sleep without screaming or crying, beyond needing a diaper change or something normal. He brought the Bible into the nursery for extra measure, and casted out any evil that may have invited itself there. He locked up that nursery and only used it for storage after that, and only went in during the daytime. To this day, that old lock is still on the door, as if a lock will keep spirits locked in. Short of pretending that experience never happened, he couldn't rationalize it enough to do anything else. We think that the entity was evil and malicious, and when my dad tried protecting me, this only made it pissed off. As I grew up in that house, I had a hard time sleeping in my room on my own. Many nights I ended up rushing to the couch in the living room, turning the TV on and watching Disney till I fell asleep. But even then I was not comfortable. There were always eyes on me. There were many more unexplained events from the farmhouse, but this was the most direct encounter with evil my dad has ever had. I've always been a bit of a skeptic when it comes to paranormal experiences. My family's religious and believes in spirits and demons, and I do as well. But I never exactly bought into any of the actual stories of entities inhabiting houses and stuff. Now, however, I'm not so skeptical. If anything, I'm downright terrified. I still have no idea what really happened. My boyfriend came over last night to watch a movie and chill, nothing out of the ordinary. I'm currently dog sitting for some neighbours down the streets, nothing big. I've done it quite a few times for them before, so I know the routine and everything. Never really felt nervous at night or anything. At around 10 PM, my boyfriend and I left the house to go walk the dog. It was dark out, we were just chatting as we went down the street. We approached the driveway, and I just got this weird feeling in my stomach. I chalked it up to being a stomach cramp and continued up the driveway. I opened the garage door and walked inside. As I'm walking in, my boyfriend just stopped dead in his tracks in the middle of the garage. I kind of assumed he just didn't want to go in, since it's an unfamiliar house and all, so I continued on. There's two layered doors leading into the house, a big wooden one followed by a glass door. I opened the wooden one and instantly got this weird feeling in my gut. Let me preface by saying that I personally am not a fan of the dark and prefer to keep the lights on, especially when I'm alone in someone else's house. For this exact reason, I'd always made sure to keep a few lights in the house on for when I went to dog sit at night. As I opened the glass door, I realised that every single light in the house was off. The only sliver of light I could see was coming from the closed bathroom door. I murmured something about it to my boyfriend, who also noticed the bathroom light and was still standing in the garage. I finally stepped inside the house and instantly faltered. The atmosphere was just so aggressive. I felt extremely vulnerable and exposed the second I walked in. The dog's kennel and food is directly to the left of the door, so I turned to go take her out. As I was getting ready to open her kennel door, I just got this inexplicable urge to look behind me. Turning around, I stared directly into the empty and dark living room, and my heart just stopped. I felt waves of nausea and fear start to wash over me. It was like something was staring right back at me from within the darkness. The raw, primal fear was something I've never felt before. It felt as if whatever was watching me from there was just waiting for the chance to hurt me. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run and just get out of there. My boyfriend was saying things to me from the doorway, but I genuinely couldn't understand him. I was too scared to talk. I finally turned to look at my boyfriend, who stared straight back at me and whispered that we needed to go right then and there. He looked like he was about to throw up. I could tell from the look on his face that he was feeling the exact same fear as I was. I opened the kennel as fast as I could, grabbed the dog, and we bolted. I was instinctively tearing up as we left the garage from pure fear, and I could tell my boyfriend was as well. We waited until we were at the entrance of the driveway to even risk talking. My boyfriend told me he felt like something was horribly wrong in the house, and that he'd felt as if he was about to vomit from fear and nausea. I got even more freaked out hearing him describe the same symptoms I felt. If I'd been the only one to experience this, I would have chalked it up to a simple fear of the dark reaction, but hearing his words just made it so much worse. At first I was assuming that this was part of a home invasion, convinced someone was waiting in the dark with a gun. I contacted the owner of the house, who confirmed that they owned automatic lights, but that they shouldn't have all gone off like that. Truly wonderful words to ease my fears. I then called my mom, who was still at our house, telling her what happened as we walked the dog down the street. My boyfriend was attempting to calm himself down as I talked, and I think we were both just super shaken up at that point. It felt like we'd escaped a near-death experience. After some persuasion, she agreed to go back to the house with us to help us check everything out, but it was clear she didn't exactly believe us. To be honest, I don't care. I just wanted to have an extra person with me in case of a home intruder or something. See, I didn't really think it could have been anything paranormal at that point. I was just terrified that there was someone in that house with a weapon. She walked with us back to the house and we explained the terror we'd felt inside there, and our gut feeling to instantly book it. We approached and walked up the driveway cautiously, careful for any signs of a break-in. As we finally approached the garage door, however, the dog just started going crazy, batshit wild, snarling and growling at the garage door like something was on the other side. And the fear and nausea came back in full force, to the point where I couldn't stop crying. The tears were just coming down my face. The closer I got to the carriage door, the worse it felt. I practically begged my mom to back up from the garage door. She seemed pretty concerned at this point and contacted the owner again as the dog continued to growl. After a quick conversation, we all eventually decided to open the garage door with bated breath. Nobody was inside. Walking into the house, I felt the terrifying presence fade a bit, but the atmosphere was still just really eerie and unsettling. We turned the lights on, and after a few moments of tense silence, sort of relaxed. The dog ran to her food bowl. All was calm. Then my boyfriend pointed out that the bathroom lights, which had previously been on, was off. The door was also cracked slightly open. We sort of nervously laughed about it, and after the dog finished eating, I went to put her back in the kennel. The door to the kennel was latched shut. I knew I hadn't shut it when we left, and just pushing it closed wouldn't have been enough to completely latch it shut. It's one of those dog kennel doors that you need to push the latch in 2 directions to properly use it. The cold chill came back to me, and I shared a worried glance with my boyfriend. My mom then abruptly stood up and announced that it was time for us to leave. We all walked back to the house in relative silence, and my boyfriend and I just cuddled for the rest of the night. He mentioned that he felt like the experience was supernatural or paranormal, and I agreed with him. There were basically no signs of a robber or anything. It definitely felt like some kind of malicious entity, but maybe it wasn't. Everything that happened was just so surreal, and I'm not even sure anymore. I get chills thinking about it though.